It's a pleasure to be here. I'm on the line with Mark Taylor. And Mark, hi, how are you doing? I'm happy that you took some time out of your busy schedule to hop on a call with me, and I really appreciate it.
Well, great. Thanks, Alex. My pleasure. Really excited to be involved in a company that's in the cutting edge of technology as the automotive business transforms from a product-centric type of industry to a service-centric business. The product will always still be, a key driver, but as I think as we're seeing in a lot of sectors in the economy, that data and services are becoming more valuable than even the product. So I think VINchain is on the cutting edge of driving those new value propositions to both the consumers and the manufacturers. And with my experience in automotive, very excited to be part of it.
Well, fantastic. Everybody's talking about data, and it seems like no matter where you look, you see this word just being thrown around. If you read automotive news, or if you just go to any seminar or any public event or anything, you always hear that automotive industry is transforming, and everybody's talking about exactly what you just said. That we're moving away from product centric, like people actually owning cars, to service centric. This kind of like Lyft and Uber kind of sharing this mobility as a service. That's the best way to explain it. Everything is moving towards this. Ownership is progressively going away. Automation and artificial intelligence are stepping in. And the combination of this with the synergistic combination of this with electric vehicles and with blockchain and with with a couple of other things that are being thrown in the mix, we're progressively seeing this trend towards level 5 autonomy, where pretty much everything is going to be 100% self-driving, self-operating, self-maintaining. Cars are going to have their own cryptocurrencies and pay for services themselves, and all of this is so exciting. So that's why I'm so happy to be doing, what I'm doing, because we're right at the cutting edge of all of this, and we're part of the conversation, and that's why we're so happy to have you here with us, because our advisors are play an integral role in helping us reach that next level and help us put our foot in the door. So before we get ahead of ourselves, I'd love for our viewers to get to know you a little better. So I'm done talking. I want to hear you talk.
Sure. Yeah, I'm pretty good at talking.
A little bit about yourself, Mark. What have you done? Where have you been? What's your, tell me about yourself.
Sure. Well, I guess let's progress from where I've been to where I am now. So, believe it or not, my background is in the music industry. Believe it or not, I studied music at the University of Miami, have a music degree, and spent 12 years in the music industry, working for Warner Brothers music publications. And how was that relevant? Well, that was an industry that was completely and wholly transformed by the internet and this idea of data as a service. And during my tenure at Warner Brothers, I saw that as properties like Napster and those types of services that were coming online that were subventing the traditional value chain, where intellectual property that was owned by the publishers was basically being given away for free, and the publishers weren't paying attention to it. And I saw that this new way of consuming the product was going to be completely transformative, and that the industry that I was in wasn't paying attention to it, and that they were going to get their butts handed to them, if I can say that in the interview. And so as I was sitting there, living in this and being in the middle of it, I decided that it was time for me to go find a different industry that was more progressive and was looking into the future. And you might say, well, you ended up in the car business. Everybody talks about how backwards they are. Well, I ended up, moving on from my music degree, and while I was at Warner Brothers, I got my MBA, and then had an opportunity to land with AutoNation. And AutoNation, has had a reputation and still has a reputation of being an innovator in the space. And what was so appealing with joining AutoNation was that the management team was dedicated to this new vision of a new future. And I was at AutoNation early on in the late 90s, and was with them for 12 or 15 years. So all the way through the early 2000s, or all the way through about 2012, 2013. So I was part of that transformative process where AutoNation took the lead and said, hey, we need to bring technology to bear, and the consumer is changing, and we need to meet the consumer and not make the consumer meet us. So I worked, once again, for 15 years at AutoNation in various roles. Most of my time was spent in business development, where I was responsible for all of our third-party strategic partnerships in the digital space, so online, basically acquiring traffic. And there was just a number of fascinating projects that I worked on. There were many things that AutoNation tried early on that were a little bit too early in the space, with online purchase process, for instance. And then during my time there, it came full circle. We tried it. The channel wasn't quite ready for it, but we were able to leverage various pieces of the technology that we were building out in a more practical way on a path of moving from let's say old school to the new paradigm that's out there now. And then as time went on, a lot of the stuff that we were working on early on has now come full circle and is back as key talking points and key drivers in the business. For instance, being able to transact online and buy a car without walking into a dealership. So that was very fascinating. Got to work with a number of leaders in the automotive space. AutoNation just was, and still is, of forward-thinking, progressive leadership that has a deep understanding of the automotive space, where the automotive space was, where it is today, and where it's heading in the future. So that was extremely exciting, and had a long tenure there, and was able to work with and still enjoy close relationships with a lot of thought leaders and doers in the space. 15 years is a long time to spend at a single company. My tenure at AutoNation was very fulfilling and rewarding. It was a fantastic company to work for. It was just time to move on and do something else. Okay. So today, I am head of business development for PureCars, which is a digital advertising company. We specialize in delivering digital advertising services to dealers at Tier 3. And my role in the organization is marrying our services to the OEM manufacturer requirements and programs. So I'm once again right in the middle of a transformative segment of the business, where we're providing cutting edge search technology, display, programmatic display, retargeting, leveraging all of these big data sets. We have partnerships with Oracle, tons of folks in the space where we're using data to become more efficient and effective with advertising for car dealers. And the beauty of being in that space is, as the sales process and the ownership process changes, the requirement of a company to connect with a consumer online never goes away. The message might change, and the actual service that you're selling might change, but the ability to identify customers that have a need and connecting them with a provider that fulfills that need will never go away in this space. And so I'm very excited to be involved in this.
You're that middle layer between, the consumers and the providers of whatever it is that they're in the market for. So what you mentioned, the digital advertising space and like the next generation of searching and being really like the next generation of understanding your customer and being able to communicate with your customer. That's basically what PureCars provides for dealers in tier threes.
Yeah, absolutely. And along with the ability to measure the results and understand what's working and what isn't working, which is very, very important.
Yeah. So, what is one of the more interesting projects, or what is if we kind of understand, pure cars in a nutshell, but if we take a deep dive into one thing that you would, like a project or something interesting that you've done at Pure Cars, or something, what separates Pure Cars from, let's say, your competitors?
Well, it's the combination of great employees combined with a highly functional and advanced technology platform. So, the digital advertising space is changing constantly. There are new channels opening up. There's new ways that people are trying to understand, the value proposition that the retailers and the manufacturers are putting in the marketplace. And PureCars has a unique combination of being able to deliver highly precise, highly focused advertising solutions at scale. So the at scale part is the tricky part, right? It's, you can have 25 customers and you can have 15 employees that are brilliant, and those 15 employees can deliver very innovative solutions and can figure things out. But when you try to say, I want to operate at that level, but with 5,000 customers and billions of searches,
Really tricky.
right? That separates the truly innovative companies that can operate at scale versus a mom and pop boutique shop. So we specialize in being able to. I like to say we deliver precision and measurement at scale.
Okay, I got it. Got it. So, with all of these different technological advancements right at the horizon, right? Really, I shouldn't even say horizon anymore because change is upon us. What you said, that we're in the midst of constant digital change. We're like, things all around us are changing, no matter where you look. Different trends are emerging. So what are some of those trends? Previously we talked a little bit about mobility as a service, but can you dive a little bit deeper into it? Or are there other changes that you see on the horizon besides mobility as a service? And how do different technologies play into all of this?
Well, I think we're going to end up seeing that,
Yeah.
that life is going to be a seamless experience, right? It's all about, you know, as I live my life, and when I say I'm talking about everybody in general. As we live our lives,
Mhm.
uh, today we take things for granted, like the ability to access information on our phone on the go, anywhere, anytime. To the ability to, as you're flying on a plane, to finish, an RFQ for General Motors, and then also book a vacation, while you're in the middle of doing all this. And those are overly simplified, kind of viewpoints. But if you really peel that apart, that's really what it's all about. And as we think about the automotive space, you say, well, the vehicle is a highly it's a highly valued asset. It's not an extremely productive asset, because if you think about it, in a traditional ownership model, you buy a car and it sits idle 95% of its life,
Right.
and it's the second most expensive thing that we purchase.
The first being.
People will spend a year's salary on buying a car, and they'll finance it for 7 years. And the reason why people do that today is because the utility of that vehicle is extremely high. So even though you aren't using that vehicle for 95% of its life, and you've got this giant chunk of your earnings invested in it, the value that you derive from being able to use that vehicle is so high that it offsets. The new paradigms that are coming into play here with mobility as a service will allow you to bring into line your expense versus a utility, and it will close that gap. Whenever you have those big gaps, that's where the opportunities lie. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
sure.
That's a really beautiful way of explaining exactly like the change that's upon us. I've heard different people talk about it in different ways, but I think that was the most coherent and relatable way to explain exactly what's happening and like what mobility as a service really is. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt. I'm gonna
Yeah. No, not a problem. I mean, so it's I just go back to economics, right? When we talk about people will pay for marginal utility, right? It's the value that you derive from being able to consume whatever the product is, and the product meaning a product or a service. What's happening today is that product and service are kind of melding and blending together, and there was a lot of prognostication back in the early 2000s about how the internet was going to put everybody out of business and it was going to change everything. And there was a lot of hype, a lot of money. And, for those of us who are old enough to remember, there was a giant bubble that exploded. And then, of course, everybody was saying, that's it, it's dead. This was all a bunch of crap. Well, no, it wasn't. There was a lot of irrational exuberance, but the underlying fundamental principles of the promise that was being revealed by having all of us, instant access to data, everybody being interconnected. Last night I watched an hour and a half lecture on quantum physics, right, from guys from MIT. 20 years ago, you wouldn't be, never be able to do that.
At MIT, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to go out and buy a book. So, and you'd have to find it. Just incredible transformation. And folks like Amazon, who made wise investments and have stuck with it, really, we're starting to see that transformation that occurred when that everybody was prognosticating about. It didn't happen at the pace that everybody thought it would, and it happened and morphed in different ways. But I think what we saw coming out of that bubble was that, fundamental sound business will always be fundamental sound business, and crazy speculation will always be crazy speculation. So, I think we're in another area where, separating the chaff from the wheat is going to happen again. I do believe that blockchain, this ability to have verified, accurate data that will enable these mobile services is going to fundamentally transform and be a driver in fundamentally being able to transform this mobility service. On the other hand, I don't believe it will happen overnight, and I think there will always be a particular segment of the population that's going to want to own a vehicle.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So anybody that's saying it's all or nothing is probably somebody I would steer clear of. And folks that are saying, hey, there's a transformative process going on here. We've got a sound business model. We can deliver value, and for our delivering value, we can get paid for that. That's the model that works, and that's as old. That goes back to somebody trading a bushel of corn for a pig.
Right.
Those underlying fundamentals don't change.
So, how is the blockchain affecting your business? How does what is the PureCars reaction to blockchain, let's say, or to AI, or to some of the other things that we talked about?
Well, I think there's opportunity in AI with respect to being able to, whenever you're managing large data sets, and you can have data returns, so you can have a data input and then a data output that that comes back to you based on the action that you took with the data input. There's always an opportunity for artificial intelligence to be able to learn those patterns and to be able to react more quickly to dynamic marketplaces, and to make decisions that fall within parameters. So I think what that'll enable us to do is be a lot more responsive and a lot more efficient and effective. Meaning that, today you might have an account manager that is with their set of tools that's available to them, can optimize and run multiple digital advertising channels for 40 customers. With artificial intelligence, that goes to 80, it goes to 120, and then it goes to 200, and then it, on and on. So there's for sure room for artificial intelligence. There are other digital advertising companies that are utilizing artificial intelligence to optimize and manage programs. With blockchain, quite frankly, I'd have to think about that a little bit more. I'm sure there is data that can be unlocked with vehicle usage. For sure on when you're thinking in the dealership world, fixed operations. There's a huge opportunity there to be able to understand consumers' driving patterns, and then to be able to at the right time deliver a message to talk about servicing your vehicle. I think as dealerships move into the mobility as a service, obviously the blockchain and understanding, being able to use the telematics to gather the data, to have verified data that gives you the user profile and preferences, to then be able to then use artificial intelligence to digest that information and come back out to the consumer and say, well, I see that you really like the BMW 330. It seems like you're driving 600 miles a month, and your payments are X, Y, and Z. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to try the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, with a different profile in a package. I don't know. I'm just making things up. To my manufacturer partners out there, we would never try to cross-sell somebody. But,
yes, you got to cover yourself.
Yes. Well, in today's world, the manufacturers are very focused on their market share in the marketplace, and we always want to be good partners and deliver within our ecosystem, within the environment that we're operating on, deliver value to our partners up and down the chain.
Of course, yeah, the up and down the blockchain.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Okay, fantastic. So last question. So VINchain, right? What we're doing is we're helping gather all of this data from all of these different data sources, and some of the data sources include vehicles, right? So cars that are already on the road, and we're doing this with secure OBD devices that plug in and capture all that data. Now, how does this relate to PureCars? How does having data or traditional data or dynamic data that's flowing in from all of these different connected vehicles, how does that affect your business strategies? What are you guys doing to embrace the change and get on top of it?
Well, I think it comes back to our customer today is the franchise dealership, in partnership with the manufacturers and their efforts to ensure that the retail channel is in front of the consumer with the right message at the right time. As that traditional dealership paradigm morphs, and who knows how it's going to morph. We, once again, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, at the end of the day, our position in the marketplace is to get the right message in front of the customer at the right time with how they would like to consume the product, and that consuming that product today, for the most part, is buying or leasing a car. As those models change, and as we look at mobility as a service, our function will still be to put the right message in front of the consumer, to go purchase either the service or the product that it is, that the purveyors of those services and products are selling to the consumer. So, I see it as it becomes a mobility as a service, and as dealerships become transportation solution providers versus retailers of cars, being able to understand, as I kind of alluded to earlier, understand the dynamics of the consumer behavior with how they're using the vehicle, married to the services that are being offered by the let's say the seller of those services, will be integral. So today today we use a lot of third-party data to understand clickstream behavior, that tells us that a consumer is in the market to buy a car within a certain window based on their behavior, and that these are the vehicles that they're interested in purchasing. And then we marry the understanding of that consumer to the folks that are trying to sell those cars, and they get the right message in front of the customer at the right time. So, that I see that service, so instead of only relying on clickstream data, and the traditional data models that are available out there now, because there's stuff in addition to just clickstream data, as we morph into this mobility as a service, and you start to understand the consumer's behavior around consuming those services, it's the same concept. Get the right message in front of the customer at the right time to sell them the service, or to inform them of the service that fits the need that they're signaling.
Basically, the underlying principles don't change, just how we go about them changes.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So that's honestly, like, all of this is so mind-boggling and so exciting, all at the same time. Change is good, or at least so I believe. And I'm happy, I'm happy to have you on the team. So, all right, last time I lied. That wasn't the last question.
Okay.
What made you decide to join VINchain?
Well, I thought that, well, let me think about that a second. As I'm progressing through my career in the automotive industry, I wanted to be part of something that was on the cutting edge, that was that was going to unlock a ton of value, where my experience in understanding where the business has been, where it is today, and where it's heading in the future could be of value to a startup company that's entering this space. There's a lot of complexity in the automotive space, and between the relationship and the around the manufacturers, between the manufacturers and the retailers, and then all of the different services that support that ecosystem. There just is, as we talked about before, there's this transformation that's going on, and I've always been very interested in, what gets me up in the morning is being part of the change that's happening, and being able to use my experience in the automotive space to help guide and provide insights and navigation around the minefields that, if you don't know they're there, that's a problem. To be able to understand how to navigate around in this space, and to be a change agent that's driving the next phase of what's going to happen.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that actually was the last question. So I thank you so much for being with us. And, I really, again, I appreciate you, one, taking the time to conduct this interview with me, and of course, taking the time to be part of the team.
Oh, certainly. My pleasure. I'm really happy to be on board, and I look forward to, the VINchain, continuing to expand, grow, and drive change in the business.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Have a great
Yep.
day.
Thanks, Alex. Talk to you soon.